Don't do a lot of these pregame pods. I don't think I've done any of these pregame pods. So I figured I'd just take this pod and just kind of put these teams side by side and compare some data amongst these guys. So OKC, we know, league best defense. It's going to be going up against the league's best offense, which is obviously the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavs are 7th in scoring points in the paint. They're at 50.9. That's going to be a big challenge for OKC. They're obviously holding opponents to 41.8 points in the paint. That puts them number 1. So very interesting matchup from that perspective. And here's another thing about these two teams. OKC is number 1 in points off of turnovers. They score 23.3 points per game off of turnovers alone. The Cavs are right behind them at number 2, 20.4 points per game off of turnovers. So two teams that are just great at turning defense into offense. You've got OKC 8th in offense, while the Cavs sit 8th in defense. So these guys are pretty much looking at each other in a mirror, if you will. OKC, number 1, holding opponents at 32.7% from 3. Just a credible perimeter defense as well to go with that great paint defense. And the Cavs have been number 1, I think, all year long in three-point percentage. 40.4%. What's interesting about this matchup is obviously what I just laid out there from the data perspective alone. These teams are really good at negating what the other team is good at. And so it should be noted, obviously, no Isaac Okoro potentially, no Sam Merrill for the Cavs, still no Chet, still no Caruso for OKC. So that part's a bummer. However, these two teams are on massive win streaks. They are just separating themselves from every other team in their conference. And we're finally going to see these two teams play each other. We haven't seen them play since 2023, which is crazy to think about. What was interesting about that game that they played each other in last was that Darius Garland is typically a guy that the Cavs will try to hide on defense and try to put him on, the weaker matchup, maybe a non-shooter if possible. And obviously that guy was Josh Giddey. They tried to kind of put him on Giddey, right? So he doesn't have to really go at some elite offensive scorer, right? And just kind of protect him in that sense. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where Kenny Atkinson decides to put Darius Garland, because you would assume it's probably going to be like maybe a Cason Wallace or a Lou Dort, right? Just one of those lesser role players. Not necessarily going to put him on like a Shea or a J-Dub, right? So that's going to be an interesting part to this whole thing. I want to see how the Cavs hold off Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at the rim, because him getting downhill is what draws a lot of collapses and obviously those kickouts for threes. Now, OKC is going to have to do a really good job of what they already do a good job of, which is defending the three-point line. If they can turn this into a struggle from 3 for the Cleveland Cavaliers, then we're looking at a potential steal of a game for OKC at Cleveland. And all Cleveland really has to do in this matchup is just take advantage of its size, which is going to be definitely problematic for OKC. These guys commit a lot of fouls, and part of that is because of how aggressive they are on defense. So going to be interesting to see if they can keep themselves out of foul trouble when they're helping out on if Mobley's taking it to the rim, if Jared Allen is in those pick and rolls and diving to the rim. Going to be really interesting to see how OKC kind of deals with all that, because dealing with the paint is something that OKC's been really good at. They collapse as a team. They obviously have all those point of attack defenders to be able to hold their own ground, to not have to help each other often. But when it comes to these pick and rolls, operating in the space that the Cavs operate in, with the depth that they also have to match OKC's depth, which a lot of teams can't really say they have, this is going to be a great game. And it's probably going to be a game that I think the Cavs are going to take. I think that the Cavs just being at full strength, basically, Cleveland is just, they've got everything at their disposal, while this is going to be a game that I think OKC is going to miss Chet in really badly. I would honestly be surprised if OKC walks away with their 16th win tonight, but it's going to be interesting to see just how OKC deals with putting out fires inside and out. They've been able to do it all year long against different teams. Some teams that are not so good getting to the rim. That makes their perimeter job a little bit easier. Some teams that prefer to just shoot a bunch of threes. We saw them handle the Celtics in a super impressive way where they just basically shut them down in the second half. And we'll see what happens tonight.